Welcome to This Explainer. When we think about the intellectual roots of the United States, our minds usually jump straight to the Enlightenment, right? European philosophers, British common law, the usual suspects. And, you'd be absolutely right to think of those. They are completely foundational. But history is rarely just a straight line from one continent to another. Today, we're diving deep into the source material to uncover a profound and honestly pretty unexpected influence on American religious freedom. It's a connection that might just completely shift how you look at the founding of the country. So we've got those classic European ideals like John Locke and British common law acting as the textbook pillars of American democracy. But sitting right alongside them in the historical record is something that literally shocks people when they first learn about it. Thomas Jefferson actually owned a personal copy of the Quran. That's right. One of the primary authors of the Declaration of Independence, the third president of the United States, owned a Quran. And the source material shows us he didn't just own it. He actually used its principles to actively shape the American concept of religious freedom. It's just a stunning juxtaposition. You have these two totally distinct intellectual traditions interacting in very real, tangible ways in the minds of the founders. And hey, this wasn't just some isolated quirk of one single founding father either. There was this deep, pervasive fascination with Islamic scholarship going on among Western intellectuals at the time. We are talking about major foundational figures here, like the brilliant inventor and diplomat Benjamin Franklin, and a bit later, the great American essayist Ralph Waldo Emerson. They were deeply, deeply captivated by the intellectual traditions coming out of the Islamic world. They weren't just treating this scholarship as some exotic, distant curiosity. They were engaging with it as serious thinkers who were hunting for universal truths about law, philosophy, and human society. To really grasp why these brilliant American minds were looking east, we kind of have to rewind the clock back to the 8th century. This marks the dawn of the Islamic Golden Age. We're talking about vibrant intellectual hubs like Baghdad and Cordoba, cities that were just booming with vast libraries and towering observatories. By the 10th century, while Europe was navigating the, let's face it, pretty difficult and intellectually stagnant period we call the Dark Ages, Middle Eastern scholarship was absolutely thriving. They were constantly collecting, synthesizing, and expanding upon the knowledge of the known world. By the time we hit the 13th century, the scientific and philosophical foundations built during this era had completely cemented their influence on Western thought. This knowledge flowed globally, eventually making its way across the ocean to the shores of the American colonies. Think of this era as the vital intellectual bedrock that Western scholars completely relied on. Scholars in the Islamic world were doing the absolute heavy lifting of translating and preserving ancient Greek philosophy. These were ideas that could have very easily been lost to time otherwise. But they weren't just preserving, they were massive innovators. They pioneered modern algebra, which, laid the entire mathematical groundwork for modern physics and engineering. They developed advanced optics that fundamentally changed our understanding of light and vision. So when American intellectuals like Jefferson were reading the great works of science and philosophy, they were actually drinking from a well of knowledge that had been deeply enriched by Islamic scholars. Let's ground this right back in the American narrative by zooming in on one specific, super pivotal year, 1765. Picture a young Thomas Jefferson. He's studying law, he's trying to wrap his head around all the different systems of thought that govern human behavior and society. And it was in this exact year, as a young law student actively looking to broaden his understanding of global legal and moral frameworks, he bought his Quran. He didn't just grab it to look smart and stick it on the shelf. He bought it to study it, to really engage with it, and to pull from its wisdom as he was formulating his very own philosophies on law and human rights. Now, digging into the primary sources and hearing these historical figures in their own words is incredibly moving. Whether it's Jefferson or other massive Western thinkers of the era, like the German writer Goethe, you don't find dismissal or fear in their private writings. Actually, scratch that. You find the exact opposite. You see a profound recognition of shared human values. You see this dialogue about Islam that is deeply rooted in respect for religious tolerance and a genuine desire to understand different things from Islam. These thinkers were engaging with Islamic texts not to convert, but to comprehend, right? To find those common threads that bind human societies. And this intellectual curiosity wasn't just theoretical. It was literally forged into tangible American law. Years after he bought that Quran, Thomas Jefferson drafted the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. This was an absolute landmark document, a true precursor to the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And the crazy thing is, Jefferson didn't just advocate for different sects of Christianity in the statute. He explicitly ensured that it protected the rights of Muslims, Jews, and Christians alike to hold public office and practice their beliefs totally freely without any government interference. That is the
नखरा
direct,
इसका
real-world
टॉप पर
evidence
आती है
of
टिकटॉक
his
पर
broad
नैनो से है
global
नैन मिलाती लड़कों की है दिल जलाती
curiosity,
पिंडी में है
shaping the
चर्चा
actual
इसका
legal
मेरा
framework of
जितना खर्चा
America.
इसका मैंने बोला
So,
इसको
what does
मेट्रो
this
में
all mean for
बिठाऊंगा
us?
कैपिटल
Well,
ले
it
जाऊंगा
matters today
F7 भी
because it proves
घुमाऊंगा
that
मुन्ना
Islam
भी
is not
दिखाऊंगा
some
सिद्धोश
foreign
भी ले
element to the
जाऊंगा
American story. It's been woven right into the nation's intellectual DNA from the very start. Acknowledging this isn't rewriting history, it's completing it. Understanding this deep historical connection fundamentally reframes our shared human history. It shows us that cultures we sometimes think of as completely separate or even at odds have actually been in a continuous, productive dialogue for centuries. Knowing this equips us to bridge cultural gaps today because it reminds us that modern intercultural dialogue is really just the continuation of a foundational American ideal. Well, that brings us to the end of our analysis, but I want to turn it over to you. What part of this history surprised you the most? Does knowing that the founding fathers were engaging so deeply with the Islamic texts change how you view the origins of American liberty? Does it completely reshape your worldview on how global knowledge flows? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and always look closely at the hidden history that shapes our world.